أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم ثم السلام على آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم الأجمعين إلى يوم الدين صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم صدق الله العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So the ayah we've been focusing on of the Quran is from Surah At-Teen, ayah number 4, where Allah says, indeed or certainly we have created the human being in the most excellent form. In other words, we have a limitless capacity of reaching our full potential. And we've also been looking at brand Q Hussein. To successfully be able to wear brand Q Hussein, that is the Quran and Hussein, and the freedom to be free from everybody else. In other words, break the shackles of everybody else, but only to be attached to Allah requires divine success. And yesterday we looked at the aspect of divine success, what divine success was, and we looked at Surah Al-Asr. So today we're going to look at now, how does this divinely successful person manifest himself? And we have the most awesome example we're going to talk about today. I don't think there is anybody more awesome than we have the Masumin, and then we have those who emulated them, who were so close to them that, my goodness, you couldn't separate the two. And we're going to talk about Hazrat Abbas, inshallah. But before that, let's just look at the qualities of a successful human being or a successful believer. I'm going to look at Surah Al-Mu'minun, which is Surah number 23. And in the first 11 ayat, Allah describes the 6 qualities that are of a true believer. One whom He says in ayah 11, Ulaika humul warithun, one who inherits Jannah. Not just go to Jannah, you inherit Jannah. I mean, there's a major difference. But let's look at these. There's 6 qualities, and there's one I really want to focus on. So the first quality is there in awe of their creator, especially in salah. See, the surah starts with قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Indeed, definitely successful are those who believe. And then it cites the qualities. For example, it says الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. So they're in awe of their creator, especially in salah. Number 2, they avoid unproductive activities. They avoid useless conversations. Number 3, they're constantly refining themselves, constantly cleansing themselves, constantly giving zakah. The fourth quality is they protect themselves from disrespectful, permissive behavior. So there's a total protection. They just do not engage in immoral, disrespectful, permissive behavior. Now then, number 5 is the one I want to look at. They are trustworthy. Let's look at what the Quran says. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says it quite clearly. He said, الَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَأَهْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ. These are those who are the keepers of promises, keepers of trusts and promises. So paraphrasing it, they're trustworthy and they're keepers of promises. And finally, the 6th one is they go out of their way to guard their salah. That is their salawat, their 5 daily prayers. And this is what they do. But I want to focus on this aspect of trustworthiness and loyalty. See, the Prophet, the 3 main characteristics of the prophets, which encompass literally all human values, all akhlaqiyat are truthfulness, trustworthiness, and compassion. We call it TTC, quite easy to remember. In Surah Al-Qalam, ayah 4, Allah says, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You have the most excellent of characters, the most excellent of akhlaq. So just look at this word first. There are two words in the Arabic language that make up human values. One is adab and the other is akhlaq. So akhlaq is a plural of khuluq as such. So it's a state of the soul. So let's try and understand what akhlaq is, which moves it towards action, which motivates it towards action without a need of reflection or deliberation. So it's done without thinking, basically. And you can divide it into two. So the first is one which is natural. It's part of one's disposition, right? So such a human being who laughs excessively at a small thing or cries excessively at a small thing. The second is out of training and habit, and it may be a product of reflection. It may start off as a product of reflection, but eventually becomes a character trait. I remember as a child when we used to go to the mosque for the majlises of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. During the Masa'ib, as a child, I didn't know how to cry, didn't know how to cry. Sometimes I didn't understand the language of the mimbar and didn't know how to cry. But my mom always used to tell me, as soon as the Masa'ib of Hussein starts, take a handkerchief and cover your face. Try to be sad. It will come. Soon it became a character trait because that's what she taught me. So a man came to the Prophet and asked, what is the best of all actions? And he said, akhlaq. So when he said akhlaq, the Prophet said you should create within yourself the akhlaq of Allah. Takhalluqu bi akhlaqillah. What does that mean? That means if Allah is Rahman and Rahim, we therefore should be merciful to others. Each of the attributes should be able to manifest themselves in us, so we bring out the godliness in us. And I mentioned right at the beginning that we fall in love with those who bring out the divine in us, who bring out the best in us, right? So let's look what are the main aspects of akhlaq. So you have becoming conscious of Allah all the time, to stop hurting others, to do the best we can, and don't respond in like but always with compassion. Now I said there were two words, so let's look at adab. Adab forms the attributes of the action of the person which are manifested outwardly, while akhlaq consists of the attributes of the inner self. So if we have akhlaq within us, then it will manifest itself as adab. The Prophet said, excellent adab is the ornament of the intellect. So basically he's saying that adab is literally the peak of intelligence. It's excellent manners based on the teachings of the Prophet. And I'll still tell you these three: truthfulness, trustworthiness, and compassion. Now, loyalty combines truthfulness and trustworthiness. Going back to the story of the mouse and the frog, we may think that the mouse was totally committed to the frog, that she was totally loyal to him, but she wasn't. She was feeding a need within her. She wasn't thinking about him at all. Absolutely not. And that's not loyalty. Loyalty takes on another meaning. And the frog, he wasn't loyal to himself because he kept on being distracted and attracted to the mouse. And that is the soul and the body. Literally, they're with this tension within them. So in ourselves, within ourselves, we've got to work out this of what loyalty means. So loyalty has 5 meanings. The first one is somebody who's loyal is supportive. They're the person who are looking out for you in both dunya and the akhirah. The next characteristic of loyalty is that they are respectful, whether in front of you or whether behind you. They're always respectful. The third characteristic of being loyal is that they're absolutely trustworthy. You can put your life in their hands and they will ensure that you reach your full potential in the dunya and the akhirah. You can trust them totally because they care for you so much, because their loyalty is unflinchable. They're sincere, absolutely sincere. They will show up in good times and bad times. They will do random acts of kindness. And finally, the last one, they have integrity. They will respect your boundaries. If they make a mistake, they will apologize, and they're morally righteous. Now, Abbas, my goodness, he is known as the symbol of loyalty. He actually is the benchmark of loyalty. We don't say that Abbas was loyal. We say loyalty is Abbas. And just like the poet said, which I put on the screen, he said, I sat down to write a poem about loyalty. I wrote Abbas and my pen stopped. So let's look at this phenomenal personality today. He actually encompasses this whole thing about Q Hussein. He is inextricably linked to Hussein. If you think Abbas, you cannot but think Hussein. Even when you go to Karbala, you look one way, you see Hussein, you look the other way, you see Abbas. They are so linked. He linked himself to the most awesome personality. That long string of longing, he tied to Hussein. You cannot think of Hussein without Abbas, and you can't think of Abbas without Hussein. You know, the greatest accolade came from him. I remember when we went to Karbala in the Haram, there was this poster which said, Irkab binafsi ya akhi, which means ride. My soul be sacrificed for you, my brother. A Masoom Imam is telling someone that I am sacrificing my soul for you. I mean, what other accolade would you want? So let's talk a little bit about him. There's so much. I don't even know whether I can do him justice. So his name Abbas comes from Abasa. Surah Al-Abasa is surah number 80 of the Quran, which means to frown. So he's one who will frown at the enemies of Allah. His name is Abbas. He was a Hafid al-Quran, he was a scholar, he was the general of the battle in Karbala, he was the strategist for the battle. That's what the carrier of the flag is. Somebody who carries the flag is one who strategizes, who, you know, he's known in history as Rajulun Jamilun Kajabal al-Azim. So books of hadith describe him as a handsome man, a tall, towering figure who inspired hope. An unshakable mountain with a soft, massive heart. Where'd you find somebody like that? When you think of him, you think water, you think Sakina. He was the strength of Hussein, the backbone of Hussein. When he fell, Imam Hussein said, Al-an in kasara dhahri wa kalla hilati. Now my back is broken and I have no strength at all. Before I go any further, if you're ever stuck, you're ever struck, there's a wonderful phrase to recite which says, Ya kashif al-karbi an wajh al-Hussein, ikshif karbi bihaqi akhik al-Hussein. You're asking Allah to remove your difficulties in the name of the brother of Hussein. I mean, he holds that sort of status with Allah. He was the dua of Imam Ali to assist Imam Hussein. So let's see what happened. Okay, so after Sayyidah Fatima dies, in her will, she asks Imam Ali ﷺ to marry her niece Yamama, who would be able to look after the children. He then marries Asma bint Umais, and they had a son Yahya, who was killed in Siffin. He then married Qawla ibn Ja'far and had a son Muhammad Hanafiya. Then he goes to Aqil. Aqil is his brother. And he goes to his brother and he says, find me somebody whose genealogy demonstrates taqwa, God consciousness and valor. Remember, these are lessons for us. Genealogy is really important. And Aqil says, come back after a while. He investigates and he suggests the family of Kilabiyya, whose daughter is Fatima. When she marries Imam Ali, she says, do not call me Fatima. Change my name. Because when you utter the word Fatima, the children cry because they remember their mom. So he called her Ummul Baneen, which is the mother of sons. She had 4 sons and 2 daughters, right? So her 4 sons were Abbas, who was 34 in Karbala. There was Abdullah, who was 10 years younger, who was 24. Then you had Uthman, who was 22 in Karbala. And then you had Aun, who was 20 in Karbala. All the brothers were in Karbala, and all were martyred in Karbala. 2 daughters, Jumana and Hani. Okay, so Hazrat Abbas is 14 when Imam Ali ﷺ dies. And Imam Ali gives his hand to Imam Hussein. He tells Abbas, he is your master. But so did his mom. His mom told him, he's never your brother. You will always call him master. You'll always call him Mawla. And Imam Ali used to tell him, Hassan and Hussein are the sons of the Prophet. You are my son, and therefore you will represent me in Karbala. In the battle of Siffin, he goes as a warrior. He's 11 years old. He had his face was covered. Everybody thought he was Ali because he had a tall stature. And they recognized him as one who was so valiant. When he wanted to get married, al-Banin tells him, go to Hussein. And he marries Lubaba. They have 3 sons. Fadl and Qasim were martyred in Karbala. Ubaidullah was very young, remained with his grandmother al-Banin in Medina, grew up to be a great scholar, and so was his son Hassan, through whom Hazrat Abbas's generation continued. These are just some facts that we need to know about him. He was given a horse named Uqab. Uqab means eagle. Uqab was initially presented to Rasulullah by the king of Yemen, whose name was Saif bin Ziyazni, through Abdul Muttalib. The king considered the horse to be very important, and its superiority over other horses was evident by the facts that his genealogical tree was maintained. It was initially named as Murtajiz, which comes from the Arabic name Rijz, meaning thunder or lightning. And this was the horse he had. So he's intrinsically linked to everyone out there, but an absolutely phenomenal example of loyalty. Let's see how Imam Sadiq describes him. He calls him Nafizul Basira, a penetrating insight. That means the intelligence he had. Wasulbul Iman, the solid Iman. He says he was Jahada Ma'akhil Hussein. He strove for Hussein. Minawim Sakai Sakina, the water carrier for say the Sakina. Oh, so many awesome words, but it is the alam. It is that flag of his, that when we see it, what should it inspire us? It should inspire loyalty, just simply loyalty and compassion. Those 3 words, TTC. So how does that inspire us? Let me just talk a little bit about why this alam is so important, or why the flag of Abbas is so important. You know, in our country, on the 11th of November, we have Remembrance Day, or in November we have Remembrance Day. Well, you know, and we remember the soldiers that fought for the country with poppies. Everybody wears poppies. So what happened? In 1915, after the First World War, there was a Canadian doctor who was inspired by the sight of poppies in battle-scarred fields, and he wrote a poem in Flanders Field. Poppies grew in the disturbed earth around the bodies of the fallen soldiers. So in other words, they represented lives that were given for a selfless cause. And that's what a poppy represents. So for us, similarly, the alam is a total symbol of selflessness, of loyalty, and of rahmah. Whenever we look at it, that's what is supposed to inspire. You know, if you look at history, when this flag was brought into the court of Yazid, he stood up and he examined it. Whose is this? He said. He said, this is the flag of Abbas. It was totally damaged. Every single part of the pole was hurt, whether it was with spears or arrows, but it was damaged. But where the hand was, it was as though it was brand new. And these are his words. These are Yazid's words. He said, هَكَذَا يَكُونُ الْوَفَاءُ. This is what is loyalty. His arm had to be cut off to get to the flag. That's what loyalty is about. We need to understand the strength of what Abbas is to know what happened. So let's see what happened on the plains of Karbala on the day of Ashura. You know, before I start on that, whenever du'as are not answered, if you find something that you're really stuck in and it's really, really difficult, then you know what? Ask with the wasila of Abbas. There is no wasila that is as, if I can say, as awesome as that of Hazrat Abbas. And why? You know, when Sayyid Khoi was asked, why Abbas? He said, because the wish of Abbas of taking water was not fulfilled. And in exchange for that, he asked to be Babul Hawaij. You know Babul Hawaij? It means the door of requests. Ask. You can make the impossible possible. It is a phenomenal place to be. But let's start and see what happens. We start with the night of Ashura. On the night of Ashura, and I mentioned that there was a buzzing sound. Everybody was either reading Quran or dua or talking to their children. All that was happening. But in one tent, there was somebody crying. And Hazrat Abbas is walking up and down, and he can hear this crying. And he goes to the tent, and it's his sister, Kulthum. He says, what's the matter? Why are you crying? She said, everybody else has got children whom they will sacrifice, who they will give in the way of Allah, who will go and fight for them, who will stand for them, and who will be able to face my mom and say, you know what? I did my best. I gave my kids to fight in the way of truth. He said, I have no one. He said, I will be from you. So every time you think of Abbas, think of Kulthum. She's intrinsically linked to Abbas as well. To come the day of Ashura. Now remember, all his life he is trained to be an absolutely awesome warrior. He is sharpening his sword. He's sitting there thinking, how am I going to protect all of these? He was a protector. He was loyal to Hussein. He could not see anybody hurt him or Zainab or anybody else. So that is, his whole life is based on that. That is vocation. And she says, we're thirsty. We're children. All the children here are thirsty. It feels like our throats have got thorns in them. And he says, can I go get water? And Imam Hussein says, yes, go. Abbas, my goodness, he got the chance to go and serve. So he takes in one hand the alam, the flag, in the other hand the water bag. And he goes towards Furat. Now I'm going to take you in the eyes of Sakina. So I'm paraphrasing this and I'm saying what she might have thought. So imagine her standing on Tilla Zainabiyya on this height, watching and telling the children, you know what? My uncle's going to come just now. Hope is an amazing thing. Amazing. She was absolutely sure that he was going to come back. So just imagine her. Imagine her standing there. Imagine her watching. And she can see the dust from the hooves of the horse. And oh my goodness, my uncle is near the river. He gets to the river. He lifts some water to drink. But he tells his soul, he talks to his soul, Hussein is thirsty. The children are thirsty. I cannot drink this. He fills the water back. She sees the alam. Oh my goodness, she sees it coming back and she's thinking, she's telling the children, it's coming back. I can see it. I can see him coming back. And then suddenly the horse stops. His right arm has been cut off by one Nawfal bin Azraq. And she can't see the alam, and she says, you know what, maybe he wants to come faster. She's thinking to herself, maybe he wants to come faster and he's dropped the alam. But she can still see the dust and she can still see the horse coming up. And she's thinking, he's coming. He is holding tightly onto the water bag. But from behind a tree, his left arm is cut off as well. This is Hakim bin Tufail. It's cut off. He holds the water bag in between his teeth. I must get this. I must get this water to the children. Can you imagine? And she sees the horse stop and then it moves again. And she's saying, my uncle is coming. Hormala strikes an arrow in his right eye and he falls. You know, when you think about him falling, when al-Baneen in Medina was told about him, and she said, and when somebody, Bashir, announced and said, Kad Qutil al-Hussein, this old woman comes out, just, how dare you say that? How can Hussein be killed when my Abbas was there? He says, your Abbas was killed through treachery, ambush. Both his arms were cut off. And you know what al-Baneen said? She said, I'd give 1,000 sons. But how does a human being with no arms fall off a horse? He falls, and I can imagine Sayyidah Sakina, she's probably raising her hands in dua and says, I don't want water, I just want my uncle back. He calls out to Imam Hussein, just saying, accept my salams, accept my final salutations. Imam runs to where the voice is coming from. He can't see. He says, Al-an in kasar zahari, my back is broken. Wakalla hilati, I have no strength. He says, Ya Ali. Nobody knows who he's calling out to. Is he calling his dad in Najaf? Or is he calling his son? Remember, Ali Akbar was the first Shaheed of Karbala. when he gets to Hazrat Abbas, Imam says, Akhi, Ya Nuru Aini, Ya Shafiqi, oh my brother, oh the light of my eyes, oh my dear friend, my intimate friend. He takes Abbas's head in his lap. He wipes the blood from his eyes. And as the Abbas says, don't take me back to the tents. I'm really ashamed. I couldn't get water to Sakina. Give my salams to my sister and my mom, and tell my mom that I kept my promise. And one thing, when anyone comes for ziyarah, they come to visit my grave and pray to Allah that I should be their wasila of Babul Hawaj. This is what he said. And note Imam Hussein said, the Zakirin tell us that he said that for the first time in your life, call me brother, say Ya Akhi. And he said, Ya Akhi. You know what? There's a story that I remember, and I'd like to end with it. Many, many years later, there was an old lady who wanted to go to do the ziyarah of Hazrat Abbas and Imam Hussein. And her son carries it. It was a time of Mutawakkil, when ziyarah was not allowed, and he carries her on his back. When they come to the bridge of Furat, there are soldiers there, and they say, where are you going? We're going to visit Hussein. And they said, that you're not going to do. And they threw the son off the bridge, left the old woman there saying she's going to die anyway. So she's sitting there thinking, what am I going to do? Suddenly she hears a voice. And the voice tells her, what do you want to do, Ma? What's the matter? And she says, they've thrown my son in the Furat. And they're saying that, she says, I just want to go for the ziyarah of Hussein. And he says, come, I'll take you with me. And she says, I'm old. I need your help. Give me your hand so I can stand. She didn't even look up. And he said, Ma, if I had hands, I would be able to lift you up, but I don't have any hands. See, these are things that we gotta keep in our mind. We gotta understand the awesomeness of these personalities. So today, let us pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a wasila of Hazrat Abbas, and a phenomenal wasila, Abbas and his brother Hussein, obviously, or Hussein and his brother Abbas, that Allah grant us freedom from this awful virus. That Allah give all those who are oppressed in the world free from oppression. May Allah give rahmah in the heart of oppressors so that they do not oppress so much. Give shafa to all those who are ill and all those who have hajat. Wherever you are, whatever home you're in, whichever country you're in, let us pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ensure that all the hajat are fulfilled. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. Let us end today with the dua for protection. Please recite it with me, and then the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah. لي خمسة أطفي بها حر الوباء الحاتمة، المصطفى والمرتضى وأبناهما والفاطمة. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. And let us send our salams to Hazrat Abbas, absolutely phenomenal personality. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع